let's get started and welcome everyone. Just quickly before we get started, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A, or just make comments or share whatever you want to share. We'll take a look at it and try to answer it during the interview. But yeah, so everyone, welcome to this first episode of Close Encounters. I'm Jan Rogge. I'm leading cloud-based expansion into Canada and the US, and I'm really glad you're all here. And let's be honest, I think legal tech doesn't usually fail because the tech is bad. It fails because lawyers don't actually use it. And adoption isn't just another feature, it's the whole thing, the whole point of why we're doing this. And at Cloudbase, helping legal teams work smarter, better, faster is what we do. So we deeply care about adoption. And that's why we've started this series to support legal teams in their adoption journey by talking to people who've actually done the very, very hard work of legal transformation and making lawyers change the way they work. In this series, we don't do demos, we don't do buzzwords, we just share honest stories about what works, what doesn't work, with practical tips of what you can start doing today. And I can't think of a better way to kick off this series than with Karen Dunn Skinner and David Skinner from Gimbal. They've helped a ton of teams all over Canada and the US and probably even outside of North America to get unstuck. And they've recently also written and published a book, The Power Zone Playbook for Lawyers. And if you haven't read the book yet, it's clear, it's sharp, it's really, really, really useful. And I'm confident that today's conversation will be just as valuable as the book. Karen, David, welcome, and thank you for being here. Maybe before we dive in, start with a quick intro. Very general question. What's your current role? What are you doing in your professional life? And maybe 3 words that best describe you as a person.
So I'm the co-founder with David, the co-founder and the CEO of Gimbal Consulting. And I help lawyers build profitable practices that they love, but in a way that doesn't burn them out. It's very important to us. We actually have a sticky in our office. It says, we've never met an unhappy ex-lawyer, and we want lawyers to be happy in the profession without leaving the profession. So that's really what we do. We do it through coaching and courses and consulting work. 3 words, creative, because I'm always helping people build things, create new things, try to change the way they look at their practice. And I also paint. So I have that kind of double thing going on. I'm very curious. I'm always trying to figure out how things work. I'm always trying to figure out how to use a platform in a new way, how to solve a problem, why things happen the way they do. And I'm a builder. I just help people build things. I was also very obsessed with Brio trains and Lego when my children were small, and I spent a lot of time building train sets.
So I'm Karen's co-founder, and I'm the president of Gimbal Consulting, and Karen's already spoken about that. But like Karen, by focusing on operational and organizational efficiency, I help lawyers be as successful at the business of law as they are at the practice of law, and then actually to have the time and the freedom to enjoy their success. That is the core driving principle of everything that Karen and I do. Be great with less stress and overwhelm, and actually have the time to enjoy your success. 3 words, strategic, disciplined, type A personality, and curious. And I'd say, if I were to apply those 3, I'd say whether I'm shaping an organization or I'm guiding a team, whether I'm navigating, I don't know, complex professional challenges, I think those three traits, strategic, disciplined, and curious, I think they allow me to lead with clarity, to adapt, because there's an awful lot of adaptation that has to happen. So adapt with a certain degree of insight, because I've spent 25 years practicing law, and consistently drive for meaningful results.
So we have discipline and creativity combined in the two of you, which is the balance you always need. You need creativity, but not too much. You need discipline, but not too much. So
Exactly.
And there's an overlap with curious. I think Karen said curious.
Yeah.
And it's perhaps worth noting that we've been together for coming up to 35 years, and we've been married for coming up on 33 years.
Congratulations. And maybe just to make sure people know about it, you've both practiced for a long time. You're not just some outside consultants that decided that lawyers were something you're interested in, but
We've done it. Yeah. Both of us practiced in big law, and I ran a solo practice for years, and David was in big law, like I said, and also was GC in-house counsel at a couple of companies, and ended up as general counsel for a biopharmaceutical company. So we have, both of us over 20 years of experience actually in the trenches practicing law. We know where the skeletons are.
Okay, good. So maybe before we dive into it, some two more personal questions. Karen, what if you look back at 35 years of career, what do you consider your greatest achievement?
I'm glad you've got that question, Karen.
What I think is interesting, and I've written about this a couple of times in different contexts, is I've taken what could have been a pretty standard path, law school, practice, partnership, and I've turned it into a company that helps lawyers around the world build businesses they love. But what's so important to me, and it's going to be a theme throughout this, is that they actually have lives that they like. And I've done that with David. So I think that's also a great accomplishment, to be able to do this and build this with my partner. And we've built out this business in a way that practices what we preach. It's a business that has given us the freedom to do the things that matter. So for me, the things that matter to me, I wanted to be there for my kids when they needed me. I want to work the hours that I want to work. I want to be able to explore my own creativity. I want to be able to ski. I want to be able to paddle. And I think it's been a great achievement to be able to take what could have been a very standard and I mean, I love practicing law, but it could have been a very standard path, and turned it into something bigger.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a big achievement. Maybe question for David: who are your professional heroes, and what did they teach you?
Wow. Okay, that's a big question. So shooting from the hip, I'm going to mention three very strong and distinguished Canadians that I'm honored to actually say are close personal friends. And Karen, you probably can imagine who I'm going to say. So I'll name them, a little bit about them from my memory, and then I will tell you what I learned from them. So the first is David Johnston. The second would be Richard or Dick Cruz. And the third would be his life and professional partner, Sylvia Cruz. So starting with David Johnston really quickly, former principal and vice chancellor of McGill, president and vice chancellor of University of Waterloo in southwestern Ontario, the Governor General of Canada, among many other, I think, distinguished elements in his career. So, as a statesman and as a scholar, and I'm not overstating it, as a statesman and a scholar with exceptional integrity, for me, he exemplifies public service, but public service rooted in a deep intellectual grounding and reflection, and a profound commitment to democratic institutions. So his example has shaped my understanding, I think, of ethical, ethical leadership and
Yeah.
civic responsibility.
Mhm.
Dick and Sylvia. Dick, on the first hand, was chair of orthopedics and then the dean of medicine at McGill for 3 terms. I think he may be the only person who was ever a 3-term dean of a faculty, and president of various orthopedic and other medical associations. But for the latter half of his career, and he's 96 years of age and still very, very actively engaged. He's now professor emeritus of orthopedic surgery and health sciences education at McGill. But most importantly, and this is the tie-in with his wife, he was the co-leader of pioneering work on medical professionalism and identity transformation. And so, what I learned from Dick is, a pioneer in orthopedic surgery and a transformative leader in medical education. And Karen and I try to be, I think, important pillars in legal education, not a practice of law, but rather how you practice and how you run a business. Dick has taught me that professionalism is not just a standard to uphold, but rather is a value to cultivate, right? Cultivate in service of others, which ties back to David Johnston, and I think also for the greater good. And then quickly, and by no means less, Sylvia. Sylvia was the head of endocrinology and the director of metabolic, I think it was called Metabolic Day Center. She was also the medical director and director of professional services. There's a theme here at the Royal Victoria Hospital here in Montreal. Like Dick, she was a professor, she passed away recently, of medicine and health sciences education at McGill. And as I already said, with Dick, she co-led pioneering work on medical professionalism and identity formation with Dick. And she gives me something different. Both Dick and Sylvia are like surrogate parents of mine. I lived with them. That they are responsible for many of my personal traits. And I think that with grace, with intellect, and very quiet resolve, although if you got her upset, she could be really quite boisterous. Sylvia, for me, redefined the role of the physician as a healer and an advocate. And I come from a medical family. My father was a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor. Our son is a doctor. So I feel very tied to that. But redefining the role of the physician as a healer and an advocate, and also showing me the enduring power of compassion and collaboration, both in shaping careers and communities.
And I just want to jump in and say, over the years, we've had so many conversations, particularly with Dick and Sylvia, about professionalism and how this idea of our being lawyers, it's the same for doctors. We talked a lot about this idea of what identity is. And part of what drives David and I is this idea of, like I said, we've never met an unhappy ex-lawyer, but lawyer becomes our identity. And this idea of living in this professional identity makes it difficult, I think, to change some things about how we deal with issues, how we practice. So this whole idea of what does it mean to be a professional as a lawyer, and what does it mean to have lawyer as your identity? It does impact how people change, whether or not lawyers are innovators, how they manage risk and deal with their clients, how they move through their lives as lawyers. So I think it's a really interesting overlap with medicine.
Can I riff on that for 1 second? I know you've got things you want to talk about, Jan, but I think this is tied in. I think it also explains when we identify ourselves as lawyer, and we're very proud of being lawyers, but when we identify ourselves solely as being lawyers and we don't have creative output outlets like Karen has, curiosity in my case, and I do a huge amount of volunteer work. I volunteer with a search and rescue unit in Montreal, and I just keep thinking of my colleagues who are in Texas right now with that horrible disaster. But I also volunteer as a ski patroller at Tremblant. But when you sort of combine, in my case, in Karen's case, we have outside interests which drive us, which reinvigorate us. And I think when we identify as, quote, lawyer, I think that is one of the reasons that helps explain. It's an explanation for why lawyers don't retire, they die. They don't retire because they're not sure what the next chapter of life holds for them. And what does it mean in the province of Quebec to no longer be a member of the Quebec Bar and therefore no longer be able to refer to yourself as, quote, being a lawyer, not a member of the Quebec Bar? You can no longer call yourself a lawyer. So your identity evaporates. And I think that has a profound impact on people's decisions about what to do later in life.
Yeah. And it is way more difficult to change your identity than it is to change the way you work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that's okay. Then maybe let's switch and dive into the power zone. Your book is called The Power Zone Playbook for Lawyers.
Yeah.
Can you explain us what the power zone is?
Absolutely. David, do you want to take that?
No, go ahead. Well, sure, I'll take that. Okay, so I think a power zone, I'm going to try and keep it super simple, but I'm going to appeal to our sense of elementary school math. Think of the classic Venn diagram. Remember those circles which overlap? So the power zone is made up of 3 circles of influence. The first is for the work that you are uniquely qualified to do. So uniquely qualified, I think, takes a little explanation. You are uniquely qualified as a lawyer. You're uniquely qualified to do certain kinds of work in your law firm because you have a license to practice law. Not everybody can practice law. And you might have some other certification or qualification. Some of our clients, one of our clients is several of our clients are mediators in addition to being lawyers. So professional qualification. You also probably bring with you specific knowledge and experience. And you might also be uniquely qualified because you have specific authority. Say you're the owner of a law firm. That makes you uniquely qualified to do things like make strategic decisions about where to open an office, which areas of law you'll practice in, to make a major investment in some piece of technology or a new office or. So uniquely qualified to do circle number 1. Circle number 2 introduces the idea that what you're doing, you should love to do. It should fuel your passion. It should motivate you to leap out of bed each morning. I've already acknowledged we're in Montreal. When it's minus 40 out in January, it takes a lot of motivation to jump out of bed and put your feet on the cold wood floor in your house. So circle number 2 is it should be something you love doing. The third element in defining your power zone is to identify the things that you do that add the greatest value to your organization. Here, we're not talking about the clients, and we're very focused on delivering value to clients. But in this notion of defining your personal power zone, it's those elements. Unique work you're uniquely qualified to do, work that you love to do, and work that adds the greatest value to your understanding. It's important to understand, though, that value isn't just measured by fees billed and profit generated. Many contributions that leaders make in law firm have tremendous strategic value, even though they don't immediately translate into dollars and cents. So a person's power zone, back to the Venn diagram, is found at the intersection of these 3 circles. Love what you're doing, uniquely qualified, adds greatest value.
And I think what's important for people to understand is why it's even an issue, why we started talking to people about getting into their power zone. And, a lot of lawyers struggle to delegate work. And especially if they're running their own firm, they're doing everything. They're juggling, fixing the printer and doing outline numbering in Word and all these different things that are not in what we call their power zone. And when we started talking to lawyers about what frustrated them about their work, about how they felt like they were caught in the grind, it was because they were spending so much time on these things that were not in their power zone. And now with our coaching clients and with people who we talk about the book with, or with people in our consulting programs, we really try to get them to focus on identifying what's in their power zone. Because when you're in your power zone, you're practicing at your peak and you're getting rid of all of the other stuff that gets in the way of you practicing at your peak, gets in the way of you generating the revenue you want, and gets in the way of you getting out of the office when you want to get out of the office, because you're stuck doing all this grindy work and you can't get to the other things that you have to do. So, when you're not there, when you're not practicing as much as possible in your power zone, you're doing the low value work, stuff that a junior assistant can do better, faster, cheaper than you. Stuff that technology like Clause-based can do better, faster, cheaper than you. And that's demoralizing. That's really frustrating. That's actually why we added this element to this idea of what's in your power zone of it has to be work that you love, because that's what motivates people. And when we asked lawyers what they were frustrated about with their work, they were frustrated because all this stuff that they didn't like was getting in the way and preventing them from doing the things they did like. And it costs you money, right?
Yeah. And it's, you can spend hours and hours and hours on stuff
Yeah.
that you're not uniquely qualified to do.
And when you're doing that, you're not actually, it's not even that you're losing. Let's say you spend an hour when you could be billing an hour. And so you're not making the $500 you'd be making, but that hour might have been strategic work. So maybe you're spending your hour doing something that you could hire somebody for $30 to do. You're doing it because you haven't really thought through the math around it. And as a result, you're not out networking. You're not developing new business. You're not making a strategic decision that would actually net you as a firm $15,000, $20,000 in fees. So you could be losing a whole case because you're not doing that business development work, which you are uniquely qualified to do. And instead you're doing $30 work.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to simplify it, really, it's when you're stuck in the grind, you're not doing the work that's moving the needle on your business or your bank account. And that's not good for you. It's not good for your firm. And it's certainly not good for your clients. And I think the last element is why it's important is when you aren't in your power zone, Karen alluded to this, I just use a slightly different word. When you're not in your power zone, you struggle just to get all of the mission critical work done in a reasonable amount of time. And time is everybody's most limited resource, right? There are only 24 hours in a day. And you don't have the time to get to the stuff beyond the work that really matters, whether that's professionally, delivering services to your client, or personally. And when we speak personally, we mean spending time with family, with friends, in your community. All of those elements suffer when you're not working in your power zone.
I think I fully agree. So I'm going to build on that a little bit. And I think one of the things is, okay, you have this concept of a power zone. How do you know if you're in it and what you should do yourself, what you can automate, what you can delegate? In the book, you use something that's called the delegation quadrant.
Yep.
Tell me about it, and how can legal teams use it? And maybe
you want to lead off on that, Karen? You lead off on that, and then I'll cover some things that maybe you don't want to cover.
Sure. So once you've identified, what's in your power zone, and our book actually talks people through step by step exactly how to figure it out. There are exercises built into every chapter for helping you identify what's in your power zone. The next step is to figure out how you can spend more time in it. And to do that, you're going to have to offload the things that are getting in your way. And really, you need to understand how you can focus more on that work and how you can delegate the rest. So the delegation quadrant is a tool that helps you understand what you can delegate. But it starts by really first understanding what you do all day, every day.
So that ties in with another tool that you'll have seen, Jan, in the book, which is, it's not a tool, it's an exercise. We call it the Post-it party. Credit to 3M for Post-its, but you can use any sticky notes, but we strongly recommend people use Post-it notes.
They stick better.
They stick better, and they don't fall off the wall, but they also don't mark the wall when they do come off. So the idea of a Post-it party is going back to the theme of how do you know what to delegate? Well, you don't know what you don't know. You know that. You're business partners together. You don't know what you don't know. And so to figure out what it is you're going to delegate, you got to know what you're doing. So the Post-it party really starts with getting up packages of sticky notes, a Sharpie, not a fine pen, but a reasonable weight Sharpie, something that when you write on the Post-it notes, you can see from a distance. And we strongly encourage people to do this way, tactile, analog, pen, paper, wall. So take some wall space beside where you work. Don't do it digitally, because then when the file's closed, you don't see it. On your wall, out of the screenshot of your camera, so your clients don't see it. But track everything that you do in the day. No task is too small. For every individual task, write it down on an email. Prepared invoice, gave instructions to assistant, went to court, prepared motion, redrafted purchase and sale agreement, whatever it is, one task per Post-it, and then stick it on the wall. Just randomly stick it on the wall. But do this exercise not across 5 minutes or a day, but do it across 3 to 4 weeks. Why? Because there are some things, Jan, that we do regularly, just not that often. Maybe it's a task, like in my case, accounting work, that I have to do once a month. Or filing my quarterly sales tax reports with the Canada Revenue Agency. That's quarterly, so it's only once every quarter, but I still have to do it unless I delegate it. I wouldn't remember that that's a task that I do if I didn't go through the cycle of work. So do the exercise long enough that there's a fair chance that you've covered pretty much everything you're doing. Yeah. That's the post-it party, which leads us to the next tool, which is, you referred to it, the delegation quadrant. And I'm going to let Karen talk about what you do with all those post-its that you look at every day you walk into your office and add to as you think through things.
The delegation quadrant is basically a way to organize all those post-its into 4 categories. And then from those 4 categories, you decide what you're going to continue to do, what everybody's going to stop doing, and then what you're going to start to delegate and automate. So the first category is all of the things that you do because you're uniquely qualified to do it, because that's what you have the experience to do. It is essentially your power zone. So the things that you must do because you own the business or because you have the qualifications. The category 4, if I jump to the other end, category 4 is for all the stuff that when you look at it, you're looking at this list of post-its and you're like, why is anybody doing that at all? And there are so many things that we do on a daily basis that we do just because we've always done them. And when you really look at it, you're like, why is anybody doing that? Is it adding any value to the business? Is it taking up time and we're just doing it because we've always done it? Is it kind of our normal, but it's not valuable? That goes in category 4. And then you have these last 2 categories, 2 and 3. Category 2 is for all of those post-its that you look at and you say to yourself, somebody has to do it. It's important to the firm. Somebody has to do it. It does not have to be me. And I really don't like doing it. So that's 2. In 3, you're going to put the things that have to be done. Somebody in the firm has to do it. That person does not have to be you, but you like doing it. And the only reason to split up categories 2 and 3 is it helps you decide where you're going to focus first. You can't delegate everything. You can't automate everything. You're going to start with the things in category 2, because when lawyers think about delegating, they push back. What we hear all the time is, oh, no one's going to do it as well as I can do it. It would take me too long to explain. I'm just going to have to correct all their mistakes in the end anyway, so I'm not going to bother. When you start with delegating the things that you truly hate doing, the things that grind you down, the things that when you look at your calendar in the morning, you're like, oh, I've got to do X, Y, Z today. And you get that sinking feeling. As soon as you start delegating those things, you're going to be a lot less likely to take them back when somebody makes a mistake. So it's really just for us a little psychological trick of saying, start by delegating the things that you really don't like to do, because you will be less tempted to take them back. If you delegate something you really enjoy, the first time someone's going to make a mistake, you're going to come up with a really good excuse to take it back.
Jan, do we have time for a quick anecdote? Because Karen's talking about this makes me think of a client of ours, and I can maybe tell you how they talked about and used this concepts in their own law firm. Do I have a minute and a half?
Yes, I'm going to give you a minute and a half.
So this is a firm of 12 to 15 people in the Greater Toronto area in Canada, and the law firm owner and the managing partner, same person, he bought a copy of the book for every single member of his firm, and he asked them all to read it. He gave them a deadline, and he checked up on them over the course of a month. The book does not take a month to read. It takes maybe 2 or 3 days to read, and that's in bits and pieces. But he wanted them to pay particular attention to the chapters on delegation, which include the things that we were just discussing, the post-it party and the delegation quadrant. Then what he did was he asked everybody, having read the chapters, to actually do their own post-it party, to identify their own power zone, and to complete their own delegation quadrant. Then the managing partner and the chief operating officer of the firm got together one-on-one with all of the key people in the firm. In some cases, maybe some administrative staff were left for the COO alone and not the managing partner. But the point is, they met with each individual to review the results of the exercise, to understand how each person defined their power zone. And there was a bit of a back and forth there, because what Susie thought was her power zone or inner power zone, the managing partner might have thought, well, actually, it's probably not in your power zone, and here are the reasons why. But ultimately, they gelled on what everybody's power zones were. Then they brought everybody together to create a consolidated understanding of a collective delegation quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
They were then able to determine how work should be reallocated more effectively and efficiently within the team, and also what work should be outsourced, automated, or, to Karen's point about quadrant 4, eliminated altogether because it's not adding any value to the firm at all. So there's a real life example of how someone took the principles that we discussed in the book and popularized them across the entire firm, and then had real gains because they were much more focused on what should be being done by which individuals, how, when, and why, as opposed to just randomly saying, okay, well, you should go off and do this.
Yeah. It worked out really well because it allowed them, and this is why we like teams to do it, it allows you to identify where the gaps are overall in support. So if everybody's frustrated or everybody wants to outsource a particular thing and they all look at it and go, you know, this type of work should not be done by anybody, then they know it's time to look for an automation solution. It's time to look for some technology. It's time to outsource that work. So it gives the leadership a lot of information about the gaps that they need to fill.
Yeah, and it actually reminds me of the time when I was at Deloitte Legal, where we also, like the contract review process, we mapped out the whole process and made swim lanes with the file comes in, goes to the partner, then to the junior, and it went up like this all the time. And then we tried like to simplify the process.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, then you can start looking, okay, what are the parts that where we can use technology to make it go more smoother, and to make it better and faster.
Yeah.
I think that's
review is a great example, but drafting is another really good example of how you can do that. You can map out how a document gets drafted, but then really look at each stage and say, well, whose power zone does that belong in? Or how can we use some technology? There's so much out there. Clause-based is a great example, but you know, who should create the first drafts? You know, in some of our firms, some of the client firms that we work with in our coaching programs, they actually have assistants using a good template and technology in a form.
Yeah.
Assistants are generating first drafts. Do you need to do a lot of the editing? No, a lot of systems do it for you. WordRate, Grammarly, a lot of AI will do a lot of editing for you.
And I want to say that when Karen says some of our clients, now we're no longer talking about our solos and small firm practices. We're talking about major AmLaw 100 firms where a legal assistant is drafting a really credible first draft because she's using knowledge management tools, clause-based, and others, and WordRate, Grammarly, and things like that, in order to create a really good document based on standard form precedents that the firm has created in their KM database.
Yeah.
And then the partner or the senior associate or whatever has a much easier job to review, finalize with the strategic information they've gotten from the meeting they were at with the client while the document was being drafted, rather than them having to draft the document, never having time to get to the meeting.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did at my previous firm.
Yeah.
So making sure that the most junior person in the room could create the first draft in half an hour instead of half a day.
Yeah.
And go from there, and then even going as far as sending a summary of the Q&A that was filled in by the junior to the senior who had to review the contract. Because once you've standardized your template, you know that what's coming out will be correct if you answer the right questions. So instead of reviewing the 40 pages of text, they could just review the Q&A, and then they knew that the output would be good. So I think that there's lots of ways that you can work smarter in drafting and reviewing there.
And you know, I just want to tie back to the whole power zone idea. When you're looking at something like contract review or drafting, you have to really think like, what is the most value you can add, right? That's the key to this power zone idea. What is the most value you can add? So as a senior lawyer, the most value you can add is not reviewing all that 40 pages with the boilerplate to make sure that, you know, that the right client number was included or whatever. That's not your power zone. Your power zone is looking at those challenging clauses, coming up with designing the gold standard for the clause and the way that you want to write it, or doing, drafting the really nuanced solution. That's where you add the most value. That's where you should be earning whatever, I don't even know if we're going to have time to talk about flat fees, but, that's where you should be making far more in terms of the value you're delivering than the time that you're spending doing it.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think that's really valuable. Maybe because we're running a bit behind on schedule, but I'll maybe to go to the next point. What struck me while reading the book was clarity. The word clarity. If you want people to change the way they work, clarity is very important. And people who've worked with me earlier on in my career will probably confirm that I made some mistakes there at the beginning. And when I was reading your book, it gave me the same kind of epiphany I had when reading Dan Martel's Buy Back Your Time. So the concept of standard operating procedures and the definition of done. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works in a legal context?
Oh, sure. David, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll lead off on that one. So I think lawyers resist change partly because they don't believe that anyone else will do it right, do it as well as they will do it, or that it'll take too long to train their delegate. But when you create clear SOPs, which is really what you're driving at, that tell people what has to be done, right? And you tell them stuff that until that point was actually in your head. If you don't do that, you're not able to delegate effectively. If it's in your head, you don't have a process. When you get it out of your head and create clear SOPs, now you have created a platform that you can use to actually to delegate. And the best delegation is sustainable. So with appropriately crafted SOPs, your delegate is not going to interrupt you a million times with questions and for answers and for explanations. And we know, and you know from our work together, that interruptions is a serious source of time waste. So the definition of done, I think, is a really important element that we have built into our own processes. Lawyers complain that a delegate has only done half the job, or that they should have known that when I said to do X and Y, that X and Y is always accompanied by Z. It's obvious they should have done Z and they didn't do it, so they messed up. But the reality is that what's obvious to you after 10 years of practice, that Z always follows X and Y and they go together. When I ask you to do X and Y, you should know to do Z. That's not obvious to someone who's just joined your team. That's not fair. Why would it be? If you include a definition of what done means when you delegate a task, you better set your delegate up and yourself for success. They're not going to return work to you until that notion, to check the box that, yes, I have done all of these things, including the last element, which allows me to say the job is done.
Yeah. And I have a really good example, actually, because we use this definition of done when it comes to preparing documents in our business. So I might say for a particular document that I need drafted or for a particular process, the task is complete when the first draft is complete, when all client information is included or updated, it's spell checked, and you, whoever the delegate is, whoever's doing the task, you have moved the task card into the ready to review column in Trello, because we use Trello. So when that draft is complete, the client information is there, it's been spell checked, and that's in the process, it's in the SOP, and it's moved into the ready to review column. That's when your job of doing the first draft is over. That's the definition of first draft is done. And this works for us really well because I have Trello set up to automatically notify me anytime a card gets moved into my ready to review column. If your workflow is different using a different platform, it might work differently. But essentially, the idea of definition of done is you're telling people exactly what they need to do for that task to be complete before they can, tick the box in the checklist or in the Clio tasks or whatever it is. And it doesn't have to really be complicated to even create these kind of processes, because you can do it as you go along. A lot of times people will push back on us when we say you need an SOP for everything in your practice. They're like, oh, I don't have time to sit down. It'd take me a week to sit down and do all my SOPs. But the way that we get people to do it is to do it as they go along. So the next time you do that particular thing, track what you do. turn on the video, use something like Scribe to capture your steps. Whatever it is, you just track what you do. You jot down the steps. Then you test it the next time you're doing that particular process. You try to follow the exact process that you just captured and see whether or not it works. Probably it won't, because you probably have skipped a bunch of steps, which you then realize you've got to put into your SOP. And then test it out, you tweak it, you put those extra steps in, and then you take a bit of extra time to teach that to the person you're delegating to. You can't just expect everybody knows what's in your head and everybody has the same level of knowledge as you. So you have to track what you do, test it, tweak it, teach it.
Yeah, and I love it how like current technology makes it easier to do that. You can create the video, you can like do it step by step.
Yeah.
And when you apply it to, for example, contract reviewing, I used to work with teams creating playbooks, and it was always like very difficult to like get them to start putting on paper how they review a contract, because it's all in their heads, and it's like based on 20 years of experience.
Right.
And now, like for example, what we have and other tools probably also have is you can just upload your your master template into the tool, and it's going to extract all the rules that are hidden implicitly in your contract, and it's going to create a playbook. So by doing this, you skip or you smoothen the first step of creating your playbook, your operating procedure that allows your junior team members to review the contracts in a very much more structured way.
Yeah.
So that's
100%. Technology makes creating SOPs so much easier.
Yeah. Maybe because a little bit conscious of time. One of the other things I wanted to quickly touch upon is your ways of working with the 5 whys. So what we often see, what I often saw in my previous life, was that people try to like, they're stuck somewhere, they try to solve the problem, and then in the end they find out that they haven't really solved the real issue because they kept working on the surface problem. Can you guide us through the 5 whys and how it works? And
yeah, it's a really great way to find the root cause of a problem. And you touched on it. And the issue is a lot of times a team will be looking at a problem, will be looking at an issue with how they work, or a problem that they're discovering, or a frustration or a waste that they have identified in their workflow, and they target the wrong thing. And because it takes a bit of extra time to understand what the root cause of a problem is, and it's easier to put a Band-Aid on it than it is to, do surgery and fix the broken bone. We have actually a slide deck that has a really great picture of a broken elbow, but it's an X-ray of the broken elbow, which was one of David's ski patrol patients that he was helping. It's totally anonymized. There's no HIPAA violations, but there's a picture of this broken elbow, this crushed bone, and on the outside the elbow looks fine. Maybe it's sore, so you put some ice on it. Well, putting ice on it is not going to solve the problem with broken bone, and it's the same with issues in a practice and problems that you really need to address. If you do not solve the root cause, it's just going to come back and bite you, no matter how many new layers of technology you add or whatever. So the way the 5 whys works is you pose the question, what is the problem you're trying to solve? You get the answer, and somebody says, well, I'll give you a walkthrough, but you get an answer, and that answer is usually a symptom, a surface issue, like you mentioned. It's not the real issue. So you just keep pushing, you just keep asking why. And for people in our coaching program, I noticed that Justin's on this call, and he's in a coaching program with us. People in our coaching program hear us ask why over and over and over again, because it's really easy. The 5 whys is just essentially you ask a question, you get the answer, you keep asking why, and it takes 3, 5, 6. 5 whys is like a round number, but you keep asking till you get to the actual root cause, and then you focus on fixing that. So when we had an IP team that was having a lot of problems, they had a really big delay in their process. They weren't getting back to clients in time to give those clients enough time to review something that was coming to them from the US PTO, the
Patent and Trademark Office.
Patent and Trademark Office. So they thought the issue was with their docketing platform that they were using, and they were going to invest a lot of money in fixing this docketing problem. But we started digging in and really focusing on, why is this delay happening? And they would say, well, it's the docketing. We'd say, well, why? Well, that information isn't getting to the docket. Well, why? And we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And the answer turned out to be that the lawyers weren't opening an email. So the assistant would get a notification. They would send it to the lawyer. The lawyer did not think that it was very important because they had 90 days to deal with it. And it would only take them a minute and a half to deal with. But because it was 90 days away, they didn't think it was important. So they weren't opening an email. And because they weren't opening an email that would take them 2 minutes, a minute and a half to deal with, they were actually causing a delay down the line of almost 90 days. And it wasn't the docketing problem. It was the issue they needed to solve was, how do we make sure the lawyers open that email and deal with it right away? How do we solve the problem of the lawyers' procrastination? Why are they procrastinating? Because they don't understand the final impact and don't realize the reason we're writing off time at the end of this file is because this lawyer didn't open an email, and that was causing a delay down the road. So the problem that they focused on was, how do we get the lawyers to open the email and deal with it right away? Not a new docketing system, which would have cost them a lot of money. So it was really getting focused on what the issue was. Even if they put in a new docketing system, that email would still probably have been the problem, and they still would be delaying opening that email. So you've got to understand, you've got to push people by just asking why. And it doesn't have to be a challenge. It doesn't have to be any sort of, issue. It's really, you have to come at it from a place of curiosity. Well, why is that happening? Why is that happening?
I think that there was actually one of my questions was like, how do you overcome or avoid defensiveness if you're digging into it? Lawyers tend to be
the child who keeps getting asked why by the parent because they threw a snowball through the front window. True story.
Why did you throw that snowball, by the way?
That's a fair question, Jan. And I think the answer is, different from being a parent. You have to adopt, I think when you're in a professional environment, adopt a collaborative approach where it's clear that you want to understand the root cause of the problem so that you can help them redesign the approach in a way that will benefit them. How? By eliminating the frustration and the overwhelm that comes with having to endlessly correct mistakes, those rework loops, or the inefficiency and the waste that grind people down. And that's going to benefit the firm and the client. So I think it's an attitudinal issue to kind of say, listen, I understand that's your perception of the problem. I would like you to think a little bit deeper and ask yourself, well, why is that problem arising? And let's just work together and keep going until we come up with what we believe is probably the root cause. And then I, as the senior partner, the COO, whatever, if we find that we need more people or more technology, I need to spend some money or hire more people to solve the problem, my commitment to you is we will solve the problem. We won't just sweep it under the carpet. We will get to the root cause, painful as it may be to have me keep asking you why, but we're going to get to the root cause of the problem, and that's going to make us all happier because we're going to solve the problem now and for the time going forward.
Yeah. And I just want to add one quick thing to that because I know I'm conscious of the time. One of the things that's really important whenever you attempt any kind of change in a practice, whenever you are trying to do any kind of process improvement, is to make sure people understand that you're going to deal with the process problem. That it's not a people problem. Root causes are often not the people problems. People are really good at adapting to broken processes. It doesn't mean we fixed the process. It just means that I personally have figured out a workaround. The fact nobody else knows my workaround causes further problems down the line. Yep. That's what you're trying to avoid. So if you have a culture around your improvement initiatives, that is, we are going to solve the process, and the process is unrelated to the person who's in it. If a person keeps making a mistake, why? Is it that they're not well enough trained? Like the problem is often not the person, it's the system that they're working in.
Yep, I was thinking of one Deming quote, but it's like every system consistently delivers the results it is designed for, something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's oftentimes it is like the system you should be looking at and not the personal faults or mistakes. Okay, maybe I'm gonna wrap up like my 3 key takeaways, I think. But correct me if I miss something, is 1, make sure you are working in your power zone and you can use tools like the delegation quadrant to decide on what to do, what to stop doing, what to delegate, what to automate. 2, provide clarity. If you want people to change, make sure they know what to do. And 3, look for root causes. When you're trying to fix something, make sure you fix the root cause and not just the surface level problems.
So I want to riff on your number 2, which was make sure people know what to do. But when you want people to change, and I think this is a big piece, that we all have to manage change, you have to help people understand what's in it for them. People always say lawyers don't like to change. They're so conservative, yada, yada, yada. The answer is it's not that lawyers don't like to change. It's that nobody, lawyers or not, nobody likes to change when they don't understand why the change is necessary. What's in it for them? Why should they change? It's again, I know you're a huge fan of James Clear, right? Atomic Habits. You want to make change sort of incremental. And to make those sorts of changes, that sort of notion of being 1% better every day is that notion of we are only going to make changes that have a reason. And I'm going to explain the reason, and we're going to work together to figure out how to make the change. People are afraid of change they don't understand. People dislike change that's imposed upon them. And our job as leaders is to help people be authors of change and not victims of change. So involve them in the process and help them understand why this is going to be good for them. Then you're going to get buy-in an awful lot faster.
Yeah, fully agree. And maybe one question for each of you before we wrap it up. Looking back at what you've done, what advice would you give your younger self starting out as a change agent in legal?
I'm going to go first because I largely gave the answer a moment ago. I think it's I would be quick to recognize that change does not have to be massive. It can be incremental. I would like to have read 30 years ago, it didn't exist at the time, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, get it and read it. His mantra is improve just 1% at a time. And I would encourage myself and I would encourage everybody on my team to basically adopt a very simple approach. At the end of every day, take a moment to take a deep breath and reflect back on what you have done during the day. Look at what you did and ask yourself, what could I have done differently that would have made my life easier today, faster to complete, while continuing to deliver the same or better quality work. So adopt this notion of, I could have done this differently, figure out why I didn't, what's the root cause, and then undertake to make incremental changes every day to what I did that day so that going forward, I'm improving. Improvement and change associated with improvement is everybody's responsibility.
And what do I wish that I knew sooner? I think I wish actually that we had pulled together all of our ideas around the power zone sooner, because when we started talking to people about the power zone and framing the discussions around change, framing the discussions around efficiency, and framing the discussions around delegation in terms of how can we get you in your power zone where you're happier, you're doing the work you love, you're making more money. How can we do more of that? When we started framing conversations about change around how do we get you in your power zone, it had a really big impact on our clients and on us. It made it much easier for them to see the benefit. And again, like David said, you gotta know the benefits. And we now have clients who basically say, okay, you know, we had a team meeting and we sat down and we said, okay, so what part of this is in your power zone? Or someone will say, you know, I get asked to do a job and I say, you know, he's a senior partner in the firm. He'll say, you know, it's not in my power zone. How am I going to get that work done and not do it myself? So they've really internalized that. And I wish that we had pulled that together and found that language that resonated sooner, because it would have actually made the last 10 years of our lives as coaches easier.
Right. So that's self-fulfilling. Really what I interpret Karen to be saying is, we wish we'd written the book
Yeah.
beginning of our consulting practice 13 years ago, but we didn't have the knowledge. We didn't have the experience. We didn't have the accumulated anecdotes to focus on the fact that really what we were talking about could be summarized this way. And now it's a great teaching tool. In fact, we were talking to Justin earlier today, and he's like, I got the book. It's like, okay, read this chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we'll talk about the rest another day. But we can use it to get people to a point in our relationship where we can move them much faster to what it is they want to achieve, because we don't have to reiterate. They can read with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or a iced tea, whatever.
Great. Thanks, Karen and David, for this great conversation. That's it for the first episode of Close Encounters. If you found this valuable, share it with someone who's leading change in legal. Huge thanks again to Karen and David. You can learn more about their work at gimbalconsulting.com or order the Power Zone Playbook for lawyers.
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. And if you have any other feedback, ideas, or want to suggest a guest, just reach out on LinkedIn to me, or if you want to connect with David and Karen, go ahead and reach out to them on LinkedIn.
We do free strategy sessions. So you can go on the website, gimbalconsulting.com. You can book a free strategy session with us, and we'd be happy to chat with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us. This was great. We're glad to have been part of your inaugural launch of this new podcast. I hope it's a huge success. From our perspective, it was great to reconnect. We love working with you, and we love Clausebase. It's a really cool product. So there's a plug, even though you said there's no demo. Plug for Clausebase. It's a great tool. Thank you.
Thanks so
you.
much.
See you soon.
All right.
Ciao.
Bye.